Well, with their latest commitments, Oregon football's 2024 recruiting class is now in the top 5 nationally. Keeping it there is not going to be easy. Here we go.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day and your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks. If you have not already, please like, comment, subscribe, rate, review, please and thank you wherever you listen to or watch this show, which today is brought to you by Birddogs. Go to birddogs.com/LockedOnCollege, and when you enter promo code LockedOnCollege, they'll throw in a free custom Birddogs Yeti-style tumbler with every order. And when we do recruiting here at the Locked On Network, we throw in the free edition of Brian Smith. He is at FBScout_Florida on Twitter, and we appreciate him coming on as always. Brian, it is currently a top 5 high school recruiting class for the Ducks, and I think there are two factors in play, and I want your thoughts here as to why I think that's going to be tough for Oregon to keep it there. Number one, you have a lot of big high school kids still on the board who Oregon, they're in the running for some of them. They're not as much in the running for others, so they're going to choose elsewhere and bolster the other recruiting classes that Oregon's competing with. But then the second part is when you're talking about a top 5 class, that also has to include the portal, and portal doesn't start until, December, January, February or so. So I'm excited and optimistic about where Oregon's at right now, but staying there, I think, is going to be not impossible, but a challenge for the Ducks.
You said it. It's not easy staying in the top 5, brother. You're competing for those spots with the following programs that are the usual suspects: Ohio State, Alabama, Georgia. Those 3 are almost locks. So you're down to about 2 spots right off the bat, and a bunch of the kids thereafter haven't decided yet. So that's hard. Texas A&M, Notre Dame, Michigan, Penn State. There's a lot of schools that could end up there. Miami. I'm curious to see, though, because as we'll talk about a few of the kids today, Nwaneri, et cetera, Oregon could also go up. There's a few kids. I mean, if you add just hypothetically 1 or 2 of the offensive linemen or 1 or 2 of the defensive linemen they're after, and you can pick whichever ones you want, why not? Why could they not finish number 2, just hypothetically? So it's really interesting because right now is the teeter-totter point. This is the time in the year where a few of the kids have taken visits and they make decisions, but after about another week, it really goes about June 20th. The kids all over the country start making predictions. You'll see the crystal balls coming out and all that, and kids announce. We'll know in a week or so a lot more than we do right now, and that's why this is fun.
Yeah, and it is a fun time for Oregon on the recruiting trail, and recruiting timelines, as we're going to talk about later, are starting to kind of sort of trickle in, because Oregon's had a couple guys commit who we're talking about today on the show as well. But one more thing on the top 5 component here, Brian. Is there a number? Is there a certain threshold of big time recruits you feel like Oregon would need to land to stay where they're at, top 5, or get into the top 5? Is it 3 5-stars? Is it 2? Is it 4? What do you think on that front?
Well, there's 2 parts to that. Number one, 5-star is one thing, but like Nwaneri's a top 10 player, maybe even top 5, depending on which service you want to go with. That's a kid that if you get him, you maybe only get 2 5-stars, but one of them's arguably the best player in the country. So that might get you in. But I think that you need to shoot for 3 if you want that top 5 ranking. Georgia's going to get 3 of them. I can just about guarantee you. Alabama's probably going to, and Ohio State's probably going to. I mean, there's just so many spots. So, yeah, it's about 5 stars, man. You got to get a few of those guys.
Yeah, and they're not going to be the only school, as you mentioned, that gets those sort of guys. And if Oregon doesn't, I expect Oregon to land, multiple 5 stars in every class, because I think Lanning and the staff that he's put together are capable of doing so. We've seen that to this point. They, of course, got Josh Connerly in 2022. They landed Mateo and Jurion Dickey last cycle and had Kenny Dillingham not left. You would have had Dante Moore. There was the whole Peyton Bowen debacle with Notre Dame that they seemed like they had and then they didn't have, and that was all weird and such. So I feel like they can end up with more than just 1 or 2 in a given recruiting cycle, and they're going after some as well. But latest commitments for the Ducks in the 2024 cycle that have put them over the hump to get into this top 5 ranking from just the high school ranks nationally compared to everybody else. One of them, an in-state kid I want to talk about, Devin Brooks, Clackamas High School, offensive lineman, 6'4", 280 pounds. To me, Brian, that screams offensive tackle kind of build.
I would go inside long term, but he's a good enough athlete to play it. I would like him to be longer to be a tackle, especially when you're playing Georgia.
Longer than 6'4"?
Oh, absolutely. 6'6", 6'7". That's where we're at, brother. It's unbelievable. I mean, I know it's scary to think about the athleticism that you need and the length you need, because a lot of these speed rushers are so fast. If you don't have tremendous length, and I do mean tremendous, you're not going to be able to do anything on 3rd and 8. So it is what it is. And also, you also have to remember this 6'7" guy doesn't bend and move quite the same way the 6'4" guy is to go against that 6'1" nose guard. So you actually want a shorter guy inside sometimes. So, but he's a good athlete, and he played well in space. I liked his film. He can be a guy in the screen game. He can pull and pin, and he's pretty good in pass protection. Just a good athlete. Oregon got a good football player.
It's really easy, I think, for fans to get caught up in stars, and I understand it. I am totally of the belief that stars matter. They are not everything, but they certainly do matter. The stars don't matter crowd drives me absolutely, positively bananas for a variety of reasons. But when you look at Oregon offensive linemen over the last several years, Brian, there have been some pretty notable 3-star recruits who turned into or currently are not just good players, but above average players. TJ Bass just made an NFL roster. We're going to talk about NFL guys from this past Ducks draft class on tomorrow's show with Ryan Winter. But TJ Bass was a 3-star recruit, turned into an all-conference caliber lineman, was unbelievably good, NFL kind of guy. Marcus Harper was a 3-star recruit. Now, these sorts of guys tend to be on the offensive line a little bit more of a developmental piece. Is that what you see here with Brooks, that it might take him a year or two, but certainly if he maybe fills out his frame a little bit to play on the interior, like you mentioned, there's no reason he can't play as a starter on the Ducks offensive line, or at the very least a rotation player?
Yeah, I mean, it's offensive line. That's more about above the shoulder, understanding what's in front of you, and B, reps. It takes longer to be an offensive lineman at the Power 5 level than just about any other spot other than quarterback. So with that being stated, if he figures out the technique and he understands the playbook, the athleticism's there. The only other thing you need is the weight room. There is no shortcut there. A college weight room, like, you can look at the greatest athlete coming out after a year in a program like Oregon's strength program, see a picture before this program started and after, doesn't look like the same human being. It's the same thing for an offensive lineman. He's going to reshape his body. So after a redshirt year, he'll have a chance to start, and he'll probably be 305, and that's fine. Another 25 pounds, even faster, that's exactly what you're looking for, brother. So,
right.
Yeah, O-line is hard to project, though. Timelines for O-line, it can be difficult. Some kids don't figure it out for a couple of years. It's just part of the process.
Is there anything that you've seen be the difference between a kid like this who, is not a Josh Connerly plug and play in one package, probably be the starting left tackle in year 2, big time recruit? Is there a difference between what causes a kid to develop into a starter and not develop?
More than anything else for O-linemen, again, it's above the shoulder. It's how much they want to put into it. Because O-line isn't about mauling somebody. It's about not getting smoked. You can kill a kid 9 times out of 10, and you failed because the time you missed, your quarterback took a shot upside the head. That cannot happen. It's just, it's not about percentage. It's about not losing badly on a play. Because, like, left tackles are there for one main reason. How often does a team go to the playoffs in the NFL when their quarterback is hurt in week 8? What, 10%? 5%? It's no different in college.
Well, if you're the 49ers, it's 100%. I mean, they don't care. They can they roll out anybody at quarterback.
There are exceptions to the rule, but
yes,
again, that is the exception to the rule. Like, you just can't have your quarterback go down. So the technique and the consistency are why you see, if there's a battle at a spot, especially left tackle, the coach almost always goes with the more experienced guy. It's just true. So O-line is harder to project, but it's the mentality and sometimes just maturity. Connerly, I get, he was a dude. I remember watching his film, like, okay, well, he's really good.
Yeah.
This isn't hard. If he figures out the playbook, he's going to be an NFL player. That's it. not everybody's built like that, and most are not. So it's a process.
Yeah. Well, there's something else to get to with this Devin Brooks commitment coming from Clackamas High School, which you don't see very often. But we have to get to Birddogs first, because Birddogs make you look good. You feel good, and you can take them anywhere you go on your summer adventures this year. Whether you're going to the beach, the pool, the golf course, a hiking trail, whatever you want to do, you can bring Birddogs out there. Birddog shorts do the exact same thing as Lululemon, but they fit way better. They fit better than regular shorts too, that are made of a stiff, restricting cotton. Birddog shorts are not like that at all. They have cloud knit fabric that looks just like khaki but stretches, so you get a way slimmer fit without having to sacrifice movement. Go to birddogs.com/lockedoncollege. Enter promo code lockedoncollege for a free Yeti style tumbler with your order. That's birddogs.com/lockedoncollege for a free Yeti style tumbler. You won't want to take your Birddogs off this summer, we promise you, so go get your next order today. Okay, we've got our second segment sip out of the way. We are refreshed and refurbished and ready to go. So the other thing that I wanted to ask you about with this Devin Brooks commitment, Brian, is in-state recruiting for Oregon. And you've talked about here on the show, if you're going to recruit well to Eugene, you have to be a grinder because you just don't have that much in-state talent. And Oregon over the years, I think, has done a good job of being the premier recruiting destination compared to Oregon State or Washington for those few recruits who are Division I, Power 5 capable. Is it too much to look and say, or is it looking into it too much to say you're in a really good spot if you are consistently getting that sort of talent when it's not the most high-end talent from within your own state?
I mean, you got to be selective with it, but how often does Oregon lose a kid to Oregon State in state?
Pretty rarely. It happens, but it's not particularly common.
I would guess 80% go towards the Ducks if it's one of the two. And as long as you're doing that, and you're probably only going to sign 3 to 5 kids in state
at most.
Years, yeah, there are years they probably get 1 or 2. Why? Because it's probably, in most years, the second most important program in the state of California. First off, they get more kids than UCLA wants out there, which is sad. That's on UCLA more than
anything else. That is on UCLA.
That's probably the biggest farce of a program of the last 50 years on the West Coast because they failed so often. But Oregon's taking advantage of it. And they put in the money and the resources to do it. So, yeah, in-state, they just it's weird. I know this sounds terrible. They're almost better to take fewer because they're so good at getting kids out of other people's backyards that are better players. They should probably bypass on most of the in-state kids. Just be selective. If the guy fits, okay, but there's no reason to worry about it too much. I guess that's the easiest way to say it. The 1 or 2 they're getting has got them into a top 10 program. It's not broke. Don't fix it.
Right.
Oregon is the exception to almost all the recruiting rules. It's really hard to figure out where they're going to get kids from year to year.
Right. And I feel like it's almost a reverse dynamic of recruiting in-state Oregon kids, where those kids want to go to Oregon more than Oregon necessarily wants them. Doesn't mean there isn't mutual interest, but it's more like, boy, I would love to get an offer from Oregon because they're going after these kids from Texas, and they're going after these kids from California. They're going after, a 5-star from the middle of the country or whatnot. If I could get an Oregon offer, that would be, really, really good. Doesn't mean they can't come be good players. Doesn't mean you can't find good players from the state of Oregon. Tyson Coleman went to Lake Oswego, was a great outside linebacker for the Ducks. Chase Cota from Medford, of course, was really good. He just signed an undrafted free agent deal with the Detroit Lions. I think if Willie Taggart hadn't left, he probably would have been a Duck before deciding to go down to UCLA. So it's not as if you can't have desirable prospects coming out of there. But 5 stars out of the state of Oregon. I can't think off the top of my head the last one.
The last one I remember, there was a running back.
Thomas Tyner, Thomas Tyner,
was really good.
Who did go to Oregon, and he was indeed very, very good. But those sorts of guys are pretty rare because there just aren't that many people out there. And high school football is, important in some areas, but it's, not like it is in Texas or SoCal. They don't have the sort of, investment, commitment, and training and all that sort of stuff. It just isn't there. But he committed, Brooks did, before the guy who actually pushed the Ducks into the top 5, and that was Jack Ressler from a high school we've all heard of more than a few times, Mater Dei, a place that Oregon has recruited quite well over the last couple of seasons, a place that historically has been USC's go-to destination for landing future college football players, and Oregon lands a 3-star wide receiver out of there. What do you see out of Jack Ressler?
He's a kid I met in January. He was down in the Miami area for the Big Battle tournament. And you could tell he was from a program that knew something about weightlifting and stuff. I'm like, which high school do you go to? He said Mater Dei. And I'm like, oh, okay. Well, never mind. It was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Real nice kid, real smart. He's a slot guy that could play free safety or something like that too. He plays both ways. But I think his best spot is probably in the slot. He's a power guy, really strong. And he's not afraid to go across the middle. He's not a pure burner per se, but he's also a niche kid. Like watching his film, you can tell he's at Mater Dei because he's been coached well. They schemed up teams and he maximized his chances. It's beautiful to watch, and it's why I like football so much. Ressler is the resonating guy that you watch him run. He's a good athlete and all that, but at the end of the game, he's got 8 catches for 90 yards and 2 scores because he made clutch plays. He's got great hands and he finds the hole. So Oregon found himself as a slot receiver that's probably going to end up a starter.
Is he a guy, 5'11", 195? He's kind of in that in-between size. You referred to him as a slot guy, but there have been receivers for the Ducks. Chris Hudson and Tez Johnson are the most likely slot receivers for the Ducks this year. Gary Bryant can play out of the slot as well. Is he a guy who you only see as being a slot position sort of receiver, or could you line him up outside if you wanted to?
You could line him up outside. He's smart enough to pick up the playbook and do whatever. He's just not a burner. But he will outfight you for the ball, and his strength, like he's built like a running back. Like you look at him and you had no idea what position he was going to play, you'd say running back. So but he plays slot. And it's an extension of the running game today. He'll catch a gazillion passes on 3-yard passes or less, and somebody's going to have to tackle him that doesn't want to tackle him because he's the bigger guy. He'll be about 210 when he fills out, and he's not going to be fun. So different kinds of players for different eras. Like he would not have necessarily been a receiver in my era growing up in the 80s and 90s. He would not have been. He'd have been a safety or a running back. And there's no way they would like slot. What is that? That wasn't even a name. Like it just didn't happen. But he's a different kind of player for this era, and he fits it very, very well.
So if he does end up cracking the rotation for the Ducks one day, it sounds like he can be kind of that gadget guy, screens, jet sweeps, swing passes. Like he's that sort of player.
Correct.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, I'm on board with that because I love having a gadget guy for the offense. When you said that he played free safety, it reminded me of the last guy we had play both ways at Oregon. That was Charles Nelson. Now Charles Nelson was a burner, 100% kick returner, played safety, played slot, and was, kind of that Tez Johnson mold where he was small, he had a bunch of speed, and he utilized it, but he was kind of that gadget guy in there. But a guy who's just a little bit bigger in physical stature than Jack Ressler is Williams Nwaneri, who has gotten a designation, Brian, that I hadn't heard before called 5-star plus. Can you just give your understanding of what 5-star plus means?
Based on the definition by On3, it means that all 4 of the national pundits have designated him a 5-star, and those would be ESPN, 247, On3, and Rivals. Now, for the most part, a kid that's a 5-star will be ranked in the top 50 by everybody, but it doesn't always mean they're like top 25 by everybody. This kid is. So Nwaneri is a rare kind of talent. Pass rusher that can play multiple spots and can be an impact player from day one. That's pretty much what a 5-star plus kid is. And there's maybe 10 of them a year, give or take. These are the consensus best players in the United States of America.
So given that he is that sort of prospect, and going back to what we talked about to begin the show, that these are the sorts of kids that will determine whether or not Oregon stays or rises in the top 5 or maybe falls back, is Oregon currently in a position to continue going after Nwaneri?
If I had to just pick one school, and this is my gut before I say anything, I don't know him. I don't scout Missouri. I'm never going to scout Missouri, really. I mean, it's just the way it is. I would pick Oregon to get him for two reasons. Number one, they seem to get a random guy like this every year. Oregon is by far the most difficult school in the country to project which kids they're going to get because they recruit almost exclusively out of state. And number two, they've got a visit in September. I am a humongous proponent. With all these June visits going on, it's fine in general for 3- and 4-star kids, but when a kid like, just use Nwaneri, since we're talking about him as an example, he has different options. Look at his offer list. And now you have a situation where there's unlimited official visits, which, by the way, I hate. That's another story. But he can go take a visit anywhere he wants. Georgia wants him, Tennessee, Missouri, Oregon, Oklahoma, all over the country. It's going to be difficult to see him remembering the June visits. If I'm recruiting 5-star kids, I want the visit in the fall. I don't care what school I'm at. I don't care what position the kid plays. They're probably going to take visits even after they commit anyway. As close to signing day as I can get. Oregon's got a visit in September. That gives the Ducks an advantage in my eyes.
Why do you not like the unlimited official visits?
Two reasons, and well, three. One, because it's a pain in the butt for me, because that's just more coverage I got to go into. I'll be personal, get that out of the way. Two, I just know this from knowing a lot of college coaches. It's really hard for college coaches to stay in the business and have anything even remotely resembling a normal family life with the visits and all the travel as it is. Adding another official visit weekend, you call your wife, you call your family and tell them there's another weekend or two that I'm not going to see you. It causes a lot of guys to leave college. Literally. They would rather go be an analyst in the NFL because they don't deal with recruiting. College has been watered down at the coaching spots a lot because of the recruiting calendar. It's a problem. There's nobody that has an answer. And then the other thing with it, it's some of these kids are knuckleheads and they're going to take like 10 visits. It's just going to be a show that's terrible. And it's going to end badly for some of these kids because some guys are going to pull scholarships. You watch. It's going to happen.
Last thing for you today, Brian, just kind of big picture. You talked about Nwaneri probably being a later commitment, right? And there are a lot of those, right, where kids are going to wait until the fall, go on more visits, see games in person, draw it out and such, maybe have their senior year play out, see if they can boost their status. If they're a 3 or 4-star, try to rise up the ranks a little bit. But Oregon's had a big list of visitors rolling through campus here in June. The dead period, I believe, starts in July. Correct me if I'm wrong?
Yeah.
Yeah, so pretty soon, that's when you won't be able to have kids on campus anymore. Oregon's still going out. I mean, they have a lot of commits. It's one of the reasons their class is so highly rated right now. It's because they have a lot of commits, and they have more than some other schools that you might expect to get more as time goes on. But what are the timelines of most of these kids, and when could more commitments start coming in from anybody across the country?
The basic drop dead date for all the visits to start accumulating into commitments is the 20th of June. That's the way it's going to be moving forward because June's the big month. Most kids will take at minimum 2 visits before they decide. And like this upcoming weekend is the 3rd visit weekend of the month. So if you got 3 visits in, you probably got a pretty good idea. You're going to see kids cancel. You're going to see kids not take any more, etc. And it's like, I'm done. These visits wear out a lot of the recruits. That's the other part of it. So with that being stated, you're looking at a scenario where maybe Oregon gets another 2 to 4 kids. They're, like you said, they're done for the most part. This class is really close except for the really big dogs. They won't get as many as some others, but there are schools that got like 5 to 8 commitments right now. They'll be at 12, they'll be at 15, etc. by mid-July because they have more. Just in general, there will be a ton of commitments starting next week through about mid-July. It'll be a smorgasbord.
Yeah, Oregon right now is sitting at, I believe 17 is the number. No, 16. 16 is the number. Brooks is on there for Oregon on 24/7 Sports. So 16 verbal commits right now. Last year's class, I believe, had 25, 19 and 29, excuse me, they had 29, which is a big haul from the high school standpoint. So still room to grow for this Oregon class, but they are definitely further along than a lot in the country. We get further along with our knowledge of recruiting with Brian Smith, our Locked On Recruiting Insider. Brian, thank you as always.
Thank you, sir. Look forward to seeing you again.
Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.